The kingdom was silent when the princess was born. No cheers, no celebrations, only fear. The sky turned dark that day, and a cold wind rushed through the castle. The people whispered among themselves. They remembered the old prophecy, carved into stone deep beneath the castle. A child of pale skin and dark heart shall rise. She will bring ruin, and shadows shall consume the throne. The king stood by the queen's bedside, his hands trembling. He stared at the newborn wrapped in white silk. Her skin was pale as snow, her lips red as blood, and her hair dark as midnight. She was beautiful, too beautiful. But when her tiny eyes opened, the king felt something strange. A shiver ran down his spine. Her gaze was too deep, too knowing, as if she understood something no newborn should. "She is perfect," the queen whispered, holding her daughter close. Her voice was soft, filled with love. She did not believe in curses. She saw only beauty and innocence. But the king could not ignore the fear creeping into his heart. He had seen many battles, many enemies, but never had he felt terror like this. That night, as the queen slept with the child in her arms, the king stood on the castle balcony, staring into the endless darkness. A dark heart shall rise. Shadows shall consume the throne. The king clenched his fists. He did not know when or how, but deep inside, he was certain. One day, this child would bring ruin. Snow White grew up to be the most beautiful girl in the kingdom. Her skin was as pale as the moon, her lips as red as a dying rose, and her hair as black as the endless night. The people admired her beauty, but they never dared to look into her eyes. Her eyes were too dark, too deep. At first, the queen thought her daughter was just different. While other children played in the gardens, Snow White sat alone in the cold shadows. While other children laughed, she only watched. And then the animals started to disappear. The servants whispered about the strange things they had seen. Birds with broken wings, their tiny bodies laid neatly in a circle. Rabbits with glassy eyes, their fur stained red. One night, the queen found her daughter in the forest. Snow White was crouched beside a dead deer, her small fingers tracing the wound on its neck. She was whispering. The queen could not hear the words, but the air around them felt heavy, unnatural. "Snow, what are you doing?" the queen asked, her voice shaking. Snow White turned to her mother and smiled. "Listening." The queen did not ask what she meant. She did not want to know. Then, one winter evening, the queen fell ill. No healer could explain it. Her skin turned cold, her breath shallow. By the third night, she was gone. The king wept. The entire kingdom mourned. But Snow White did not shed a single tear. As the queen's coffin was lowered into the earth, Snow White stood beside her father. The king's face was pale with grief, his body trembling. Snow White only smiled. The king could no longer ignore the truth. Since the queen's death, the castle had grown colder. Shadows stretched longer. Servants whispered of strange noises in the night. Footsteps in empty hallways, soft laughter from the queen's empty chambers. And Snow White was always watching. She did not cry. She did not grieve. She only smiled, her dark eyes glimmering like the abyss. The king knew what had to be done. One morning he summoned the royal hunter. The man was strong, fearless, his hands stained with the blood of many beasts. "Take her into the forest," the king commanded. "Leave her there. Do not return with her." The hunter hesitated. "Your Majesty, she is just a—" The king slammed his fist against the table. "She is not a child." The hunter bowed his head. "As you wish." Snow White followed the hunter without question. She did not ask where they were going. She did not seem afraid. Through the dark woods they walked, past twisted trees and thorny vines. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind dared not whisper. Then, in a small clearing, the hunter stopped. His heart pounded. He had killed many creatures, but never had he been ordered to abandon a child. He turned to face her. Her black eyes were already on him. "You are afraid," she said. The hunter gritted his teeth. "Stay here! Do not follow me!" He turned to leave, but his feet would not move. The air grew heavy. A strange whisper filled his ears, soft as silk, dark as a nightmare. His head spun, his vision blurred. Snow White stepped closer, her pale hand reaching up to touch his face. "Give it to me," she whispered. The hunter gasped as something inside him twisted. His breath caught, his body trembled. A thick silence fell over the forest. And then Snow White turned away, humming softly as she disappeared into the shadows. That evening, the hunter returned to the castle, alone. The king met him at the gates, his eyes filled with both relief and regret. "It is done?" the king asked. The hunter nodded. But something was wrong. His face was pale, his hands shaking. His eyes, once sharp and strong, were empty, lifeless. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. The king frowned. What happened? The hunter did not answer, because the man who had returned was no longer a man. His body was here, but his soul was still in the forest. Snow White wandered deep into the forest, but she was never lost. The trees whispered secrets to her, guiding her through the endless shadows. The wind carried voices only she could understand. Then she found it. A small cottage stood in the middle of the woods, hidden beneath twisted branches and thorny vines. Its windows were dark, its wooden walls covered in strange symbols carved by unseen hands. The door creaked open before she even touched it. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor, moving like they were alive. And then she heard them. Soft, uneven footsteps. From the darkness, 7 figures emerged. They were not men, they were not children. They were something in between, small, twisted bodies with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Their skin was pale and stretched too tightly over their bones, their mouths frozen in silent screams. "Who are you?" Snow White asked, her voice calm. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward. His voice was a whisper, dry as dead leaves. "We were once men, cursed long ago, trapped in these wretched forms." Snow White tilted her head. "By whom?" The tallest dwarf hesitated, then spoke a name that made the candles flicker and the walls tremble. "The Queen." Snow White smiled. She walked toward them, her black eyes shining like polished obsidian. "You have suffered," she murmured, brushing her cold fingers across the tallest dwarf's face. The dwarf shuddered. "But you don't have to suffer anymore." A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through their very bones. The dwarfs gasped, their bodies twitching, their hollow eyes filling with something new, something worse than fear. Obedience. Snow White turned, stepping toward the fireplace. The flames, once small, roared to life. Shadows danced wildly across the walls, bending and twisting. "You belong to me now," she whispered. The dwarfs moved in unison, their broken bodies stiff, their empty eyes staring only at her. She did not need chains to bind them. She had something stronger, their souls. And so the haunted cottage became her home. The 7 cursed dwarfs became her puppets, their silent footsteps echoing through the dark halls. And deep in the forest, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting for her. Waiting for the Princess of Shadows to finally awaken. The kingdom was rotting. Since Snow White disappeared, the castle halls had grown cold. The once bright gardens withered. The servants whispered of strange dreams, dreams of black forests, of hollow-eyed creatures, of a pale girl laughing in the dark. The king never spoke of his daughter again, but he never smiled either. And then, one morning, he was found dead. His body lay cold in his chambers, his face frozen in terror. No wounds, no sign of struggle, just 2 dark fingerprints on his throat. The new queen knew. She had always known. Snow White was not gone. She was waiting. The queen searched through the royal archives, desperate for answers. She found the prophecy again. A child of pale skin and dark heart shall rise. She will bring ruin, and shadows shall consume the throne. But there was something else. A single line, scratched into the corner of the ancient page. She cannot be killed, but she can be silenced. The queen read the words over and over. Silenced, not killed. A plan formed in her mind. She called upon the oldest alchemists in the kingdom, those who still remembered the old ways. They worked in secret, crafting a single apple, deep red, soaked in forbidden poisons, laced with ancient spells, a curse woven into every fiber of its flesh. One bite, and she will fall into silence, forever. Disguised as an old woman, the queen traveled deep into the forest. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches curling like skeletal fingers. The deeper she went, the heavier the air became. Then she saw it, the haunted cottage. From the shadows, 7 figures moved like marionettes, their bodies jerking in unnatural motions. Their hollow eyes stared, but they did not stop her. They could not. Inside, Snow White sat in a high-backed chair, draped in black silk. Her pale fingers traced the wooden armrest, her dark eyes staring into nothing. She was waiting. The queen stepped forward, her voice trembling. A gift, dear child. She held out the apple, a fruit sweeter than any other. Snow White's black eyes flickered. Slowly she reached out, her slender fingers brushing against the queen's hand. She smiled. Then she took a bite. The cottage trembled, the walls groaned, the shadows screeched. Snow White's fingers twitched, her lips parted as if to speak. Then she collapsed. Silence. The air grew still. The shadows stopped moving. The dwarfs froze in place, their glassy eyes empty once more. The queen let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. She had done it. She had stopped the darkness. She turned to leave, but then a whisper, soft as silk, cold as death. The queen's blood ran cold. Snow White's lips had not stopped moving. Even in sleep she was whispering, and the shadows were listening. The kingdom believed Snow White was gone. The queen returned to the castle, her heart heavy but hopeful. The air felt lighter. The halls were no longer filled with unseen whispers. The kingdom began to heal. But deep in the forest, beneath the twisted trees and shifting shadows, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting. And one night, under a moonless sky, he arrived. The prince rode through the dead forest on a black horse, his cloak blending into the darkness. His eyes were like polished obsidian, reflecting no light, only hunger. He had no name, only a purpose. He was not here to save the sleeping princess. He was here to claim her. The haunted cottage stood before him, silent and still. The 7 dwarfs remained frozen like statues, their empty eyes staring into nothing. The air was thick with the scent of decay. And there, in the center of the room, lay Snow White. Her hands were folded neatly over her chest, her black hair spilling over the sides of the wooden bed. Her skin, once pale, had taken on a strange glow, as if the poison had turned to something else, something more powerful. The prince stepped forward. "Wake up," he whispered. The air in the room shifted. The wooden walls groaned. The frozen dwarfs twitched. Then Snow White's lips parted. A breath, a sigh. And then she laughed. It was a soft laugh at first, delicate and sweet. Then it grew, echoing through the room, through the forest, through the night itself. The trees trembled. The earth cracked. The sky above turned black, swallowing the stars whole. The poison had not killed her. It had freed her. Snow White sat up slowly, her dark eyes locking onto the prince. She smiled, her red lips curling like a blade. "I knew you would come," she whispered. The prince knelt before her. He took her hand, pressing it against his chest. No heartbeat, no warmth. He was not a man. He was something else. Something just like her. "The throne is waiting," he murmured. Snow White stood, her black dress flowing like liquid shadow. She turned to the dwarfs, their small bodies trembling, waiting for her command. She turned to the trees, now blackened and gnarled, stretching toward her like worshippers. She turned to the sky, where the darkness had swallowed the moon. She had been cursed at birth, feared as a child, silenced as a girl. But now she was awake, and the world would kneel. The castle gates creaked open. Thick fog rolled into the kingdom, swallowing the streets, curling around the houses like silent fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and something darker, something rotten. Then came the footsteps, slow, steady, unstoppable. The guards at the gate did not move. They did not breathe. Their eyes, wide and empty, stared into nothingness as the figures passed. At the front walked the Prince of Shadows, his black cloak billowing like living smoke. And behind him, Snow White. Her gown was as dark as the void, flowing like liquid night. Her pale skin seemed to glow against the darkness, her red lips curled in amusement. And her eyes, two endless black mirrors, reflecting nothing but hunger. Behind her, the 7 dwarfs followed. Their bodies jerked and twitched with each step, as if pulled by invisible strings. And with every step Snow White took, the world dimmed. The torches flickered and died. The golden banners above the streets faded into grey. The people, one by one, froze where they stood, paralyzed by something unseen. Then they began to disappear. Shadows stretched toward them, swallowing their bodies like ink dissolving in water. No screams, no struggle. Just silence. The queen watched from the castle balcony, her breath shallow, her hands trembling. She had tried. She had failed. Snow White lifted her gaze to the balcony, meeting the queen's eyes. She smiled. The queen felt the cold hands of the shadows reach for her. And then, she was gone. The throne room was empty. The grand hall, once filled with light and music, was now nothing but a hollow shell. The golden chandelier had rusted. The stained glass windows had shattered. The marble floors were cracked, veins of black creeping through the stone like disease. Snow White stepped forward. The king's throne stood before her. She reached out, brushing her fingers over the cold armrest. Something moved in the shadows beside the throne, a shape barely visible, like smoke in the wind. The king, or what was left of him. His form was twisted, stretched thin, a whisper of what he had been. His eyes were wide, filled with silent horror. He did not beg. He did not speak. He only watched as his daughter sat upon the throne. Snow White sighed, leaning back, resting her chin on one hand. She tilted her head slightly, listening to the sound of the empty halls. No voices, no life, only shadows. She smiled. The kingdom was hers, and the world would be next.